Perfect. Welcome, everyone, to our Microsoft Ignite session. This is Pragmatic Cloud Security, lessons learned from the largest Azure deployments. Checkpoint, if you're not familiar, is Microsoft's #1 security partner. We were #1 co-sell ISV for FY20, Microsoft's Security 2020 #1 most prolific ISV, and frankly, an industry leader in cybersecurity. I mean, if anyone here is familiar with firewalls in their, slightest, stateful packet inspection is something that Checkpoint pioneered. Gil Schwade, our CEO and founder, actually invented it. So we know a thing or two about security. You might have read one of our security research papers around SIGRED, or you might be protecting your on-prem or cloud assets with some of our awesome products. And we are a founding member of MISA, the Microsoft Intelligent Security Association. So that's a little bit about us. Now, the panelists today for our Ask the Expert session will be one Itai Greenberg, our Vice President of Product. So Itai, thank you for joining us. We also have Chris. Hey, we also have Chris Beckett, our Cloud Account Manager, joining us, and Amit Schnitzer, one of our cloud security experts. And I am humbly yours, Brad Orluck, the Cloud Alliance Manager on the Microsoft side of the house here at Checkpoint. And I will be moderating today's session and asking the questions and also looking at the Q&A. So please, by all means, during this session, we would like to keep this interactive. We did collate some questions up front to get us kicked off, but again, your questions, our answers. So that being said, let's go ahead and kind of move into the topics that we have so far. Some of those topics are really around securing your cloud migration. So starting with Zero Trust, I think the first one we have, to just kind of get it going, when customers speed up their move to the cloud, what's the biggest security issue that you see, Itai, we'll give this to you, that you see that they tend to overlook or minimize?
So hi everyone. So when customers are moving to the clouds today, one of the key challenges is the mistakes they would make in the cloud when configuring applications, trying to keep them hardened. It's very easy test to go and spin off virtual machines in the cloud and keep it open to the internet and see how fast it gets infected and by so many different types of attempts. So, it will take probably less than a minute to find hundreds of attempts to take over your Linux machine or your Windows machine or whatever workload that you have running in the cloud, even if it's a container or something else. So keeping your environment, and not only your application, the whole environment, tightly hardened, tightly secure, that's a big challenge when a small mistake may put your entire application data at risk. And I think that the other challenge that we see in the cloud is the fact that we are dealing with a lot of open source that developers would bring from GitHub, from other sources, and they use them to develop their applications. Once you have so much open source used in your application, you also find yourself taking open source that have known vulnerabilities, a lot of known vulnerabilities. One of the tests that we did is putting an open source in GitHub and calling this is a vulnerable open source, don't use it, and we still see people downloading it and using it. So I think that if I need to pick two, would be the misconfigurations of your cloud and hardening of the cloud, and the third one is the open source and the vulnerable code that you're using without knowing.
Excellent. All right. So in that excuse me, now I can't speak today. It's very early on the East Coast of the United States. So share, if you could share some examples, team, around security incidences that customers may have faced in the cloud thus far, or the biggest things that we see in the field that customers are reacting to when it comes to cybersecurity threats. I would say, Chris, maybe you want to take this one on.
Yeah, sure. So for me, what I've seen over a number of years is that any sort of cloud service that you take that has any sort of internet-facing front end, so whether that's storage or VMs or any sort of platform as a service, that automatically kind of paints a bullseye on your chest. So look at some of the common attack vectors, and a lot of the common stories that we see and hear are mainly down to things like insecure storage, insecure databases, Kubernetes clusters, etc. And really detection of those and remediation, whether that's automated or whether that's from a sort of a human interaction standpoint, that's really the key to kind of keeping those doors and windows locked. Because what we see is that hackers tend to take one approach or the other. They either play the long game, which is more like MageCut, for example, where they would inject themselves in the middle of a credit card transaction and they would skim that off. So that's kind of playing a longer game. Or you've got the shorter game of, you know, there's a storage account or a bucket or whatever that's open with personal data inside it that you can exfiltrate and then sell on the dark web. So really, what I would say is that you need to look at the most common mistakes that people make, whether that's, like I said, storage, databases, etc. Anything that's internet facing really kind of paints a bullseye on your chest, and just be aware of that from the get-go to keep yourself safe and secure.
That's great, Chris. And I think every one of us have opened up some kind of news article about a breach that involved, you know, a bucket being exposed. So that's obviously, yeah, it's a huge issue and a challenge for a lot of organizations when they move into the cloud. So thank you for that. We do have a question from the audience, so I guess we'll take that one out of band here and jump right into it. So it really is about how is our vision, I think this actually dovetails nicely into where we were going anyway, how does your vision fit or improve Microsoft's approach in Zero Trust? Do you still feel that network plane is the focus area more than identity plane? So I would say maybe Amit, you want to answer that one?
Absolutely.
Excellent.
So network plane is not the only plane available. Identity is indeed a very significant one. I wouldn't say one over the other, but I would say probably everything together is the approach we're taking, where we're applying security on all the planes together. The first thing I would probably touch is about visibility. And if you're using our products, you can gain visibility across your environments, across your entire hybrid cloud or multi-cloud. And then you can apply security not just on the network plane, where obviously Checkpoint has a lot of products for many, many years. We've also developed throughout our own development and throughout acquisitions done in the recent years. We've done some improvement and developments around the identity and the control plane of the cloud. So obviously, we understand the significance of additional planes, not just the network. Absolutely, yes.
If I can add to this comment that Amit does, very nice. I think, first of all, it's important that even when you define policy that is enforced on the network, you want to do it based on the identity of the workload. So for that, you need to actually understand is this what's the real identity of the containers, the serverless, the VM itself, whether it's part of a bigger application, obviously also the users that are trying to access those applications. So even if you enforce the policy on the network, you want to do it based on identity and not based on 5 tuples legacy network policy element. Definitely, you want also to bring the enforcement to both ends. One is to the to workload itself, to run the enforcement on the workload, and to run the enforcement during CICD. So this is the shift left and the shift up in terms of how you want to apply the security.
It's a good point too, Itai. I would say that CI/CD automation too is something that we're hearing a lot about in the field from our customers moving to Azure Cloud and securing those workloads with Checkpoint. So great point. Is there anything else you would like to get into on CI/CD before we move on and ask a couple more questions here?
So on the CI/CD part, I would say that we are investing in 2 areas very much. We have a product now that we launched, which is called Shift Left, which the main purpose of this is to make sure that the developer, the DevOps, fail fast. If you make a security mistake, don't wait until I find it in production environment. I want to alert and I want to make sure that the DevOps person, the developer, knows about it during the CI/CD. So for that, we developed a solution that is called Shift Left that gives you a lot of scanners. Scanners for vulnerabilities, scanners of hardening, scanning of posture, configuration elements, a lot of things, and alert about them during this stage, whether it's integration with Tenable, whether it's integration with other CICD tools. The other element is how do you inject your security into production via the CICD? And that's the second element of CICD, which is I have an enforcement point that lives maybe on the containers or on the serverless or maybe in the network. How do I not spending time to do it manually, but as part of my rollout of my CI/CD process of my workload application inside the cloud? And how do I inject security in this process? So these are the two key elements that we developed and integrate into the CI/CD process.
That's excellent, and that's something that we've really seen that that Microsoft customers have been really pleased with, is the fact that we integrate very, very nicely with those capabilities that are in the foundation of the security fabric of Azure. So that's a great point to make. So excellent. Let's scoot along a little bit further. Let's talk about some workloads and past security. We have a question over here that was, how do we secure this era of native cloud and microservices? Obviously, there's a lot of new technologies in the cloud. It's really cloud first, and that's the only way to move forward. And there's a little bit of ethereal kind of feel to a lot of these capabilities in the cloud. So maybe, Chris, if you want to field that one and tell us what your thoughts are, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. So as Itai and Amit have already mentioned, there's a lot of dependencies now on open source libraries, and we're really kind of putting our faith in other people. And I think by and large, most people are pretty trustworthy, but sometimes you never really quite know what you're downloading, what you're tying a dependency to. And obviously this session is about pragmatic security. So we need to be pragmatic and say, we do want these libraries, but we want to be able to validate them actually before we push them out into production. Because that way we can fail fast, so we know if there's a potential issue, whether that's whether we use a container scanner and finds a vulnerability in that, whether there's embedded API keys, for example, we can find it very quickly, kind of before it gets into the big bad world, that we've got something wrong with that and we can correct it. The other kind of factor in that is that once it's out there, you can't kind of take it back. So if we can bring that to the very start of the pipeline, discover that very, very quickly, there's lots of small pieces of microcode that we need to analyze. We can look at static code analysis. We can do workload scanning. We can also even look at things like, once we're kind of past that stage where it's past all the validation at that point, we can then start looking at what the normal behavior of that, say, serverless function looks like. So we can trigger that a number of times. We can look at what it does, what network calls it makes, what API calls it makes, what identity it uses, for example. And then once we're past the point of scanning it and we're okay with it, obviously threats evolve over a long period of time. So once we're in the position whereby we kind of move past the initial scan point, we need to be able to secure it once it's actually being deployed. So once we know what normal looks like, we can then start seeing if there's any sorts of new vulnerabilities, 0 days, that sort of thing that may pop up when serverless functions, for example, are being run. And then it really gives you sort of both sides of the coin, the before and the after as well.
Oh, that's great. And really with backgrounds of a lot of our audience members and things like Power Platform and Azure Functions, I can only see that becoming more and more critical as time goes on. So great points, Chris. We're going to go ahead and shift gears just slightly. We're going to grab one of the questions out of the Q&A. So I will allow you gentlemen to decide who would like to answer this one, but we have one that is, what do you see as a good practice for using Security Center in combination with SOC for small businesses?
So I will take it. One of the key challenges today, small, but not only small businesses, I would say also large businesses are dealing with, is the amount of noise that they're getting from all the different security products they're using. So oftentimes they would use multiple security products. They get a lot of alerts. Many times those alerts only came to tell you that, one, you had a security attempt, but it was prevented, or two, there was a security attempt and we don't block it, but we just alert about it. And we don't know even if your computer got infected or not, which is even worse. If you get an alert that says something bad happened and we block it, you're good. If you get an alert that says something bad happens and we're just telling you, but we don't know if you got infected or not, that's very difficult. But no one really tells you, we know in very high certainty that this device, this workloads, this IoT is actually infected. And then what do you need to do? And the whole role of SOC is, one, make sure that everything is green, but if something is red, to know how to very, very fast and in a very, very intuitive and way to remediate the problem. And I think that when I'm working today with a lot of SOC organizations and large companies and with a lot of MDRs that give services to mid-sized companies, I see that they are facing the same problem. And I think that what we as the industry needs to do, we need to find the needle in the haystack in the way that we are telling you, go, this is the problem that you need to deal with, and these are the very clear steps that you need to do in order to clean it up. We came up with a product that is called Infinity SOC, and that's exactly what we are attempting to do, is to give a very clear guidance about how to remediate computers, workloads, IoT devices that we have high certainty that they are infected.
That's great. So basically what you're trying to say, Ty, is that when it comes to SOC, Checkpoint is going to make the actionable actioned, essentially.
Yeah.
Perfect. That's excellent. All right. Excellent. So let's go ahead and jump into another topic area that we have. So SASE is something that's awfully popular in the security space right now, in the cloud security space. We're hearing a lot about it. So we just recently heard, if anyone has been looking at any of their tech blogs lately, they've heard that Checkpoint made an acquisition just recently for a SASE solution. What can you tell us about this, and how does it fit into this, this all-up Checkpoint story or Infinity and the like? And I guess I'd say, Ty, if you want to go ahead and jump on that. Okay. Being VP of product, come on, you're the guy who's got all the inside track information.
Actually, we acquired Odo, and I invested many months to evaluate many different companies for the zero trust and for the remote access use case. So we Checkpoint offering remote access to corporate applications for many years with our VPN remote client. So many of our customers, this is what they do. But now when the application moving to the cloud, we wanted to find a solution that allows you to access to applications not only on-premise but everywhere. And second, because of the corona and because everyone moved to work from home and because many are using not only managed computers but also unmanaged computers and mobile devices and home computers, it was crucial for us to find a solution that will allow someone to access corporate applications even from those unmanaged computers. And that's a very tricky situation, because how do you do authentication? How do you do compliance check for the device if it's not managed? How do you allow access only to the application and nothing else? And we find Odo to do an amazing job in this space, which fits perfectly to our SASE strategy, which we launched a year ago. For the branch office. Now we have it also for the remote users, and we allow a clientless, seamless connectivity to any corporate application. And that was our motivations to acquire Odo and to put it in our SASE solution.
Yeah, that's really fantastic news. I would say, from being a user myself to a reformed infrastructure engineer responsible for endpoint management, anything we can do to make that easier for users to have ubiquitous secure computing is absolutely tremendous. So that's awesome, Itai. Thank you.
I would say two things about this that I think it's important. One, it's not only about accessing HTTPS application. It's accessing RDP application. It's accessing SSH applications. It's accessing also SQL. So it's multiple connectivities from a clientless computer, as well as accessing the cloud workload. So we scan the clouds, and we give you a very granular access permissions only to the workloads and the applications and the IAM policies that you need to have in the cloud. So it's going into more use cases than just accessing your wiki at your corporate website.
Got it. No, that makes sense. Now, actually, before I move on, I did advance the slide, but we're going to stop for just one moment. There was one question that was, what is the checkpoint strategy for Zero Trust and SASE together? Do you want to speak about that at all?
Amit, do you want to take it? Do you want to say a few words about it? Or do you
Sure.
want me?
I can, yes, absolutely. So as for Zero Trust, usually what we're doing is combining all of our products together. That is true also for SASE as well. We're combining from a management perspective to have a single pane of glass is where everything is collected and monitored and reported to, where you can sit and respond if issues arise. And we're talking about security issues, obviously. We've also published a while ago, and we're keep updating this paper. It's a high conceptual approach where we give you our recommendation of how to build infrastructure, a complete infrastructure from ground up in a best practice scenario. And we're not just talking about which products to use from our perspective, but also how do you configure the infrastructure, the Microsoft Azure in this example, how do you configure it to be systematically more secure than its native nature. And so we call it the security blueprint if you would like to search it online. So Checkpoint's Cloud Security Blueprint. And again, it's a high conceptual approach of white papers showing you just the good practices of how to build infrastructure from ground up. So that would be the second thing. And as Itai mentioned before, and this is also relevant when you're combining everything together, is about the application-aware security. You can actually use dynamic nature labels and tags from the cloud environments, and it's not necessarily only limited to Azure, but also any other cloud vendor or platforms that you're using, whether it's on-premise or not. And you can combine those labels and tags and then have your security policy aligned and also dynamically evolve with those tags. So whenever a new application shows up in the network, wherever it is, the security policy and the compliance is already up to date, and the enforcement happens on the first second. So that, in my opinion, those are the three main pillars of best practice.
I think we have over 4,000 customers today that we secure in the cloud. Most of them are large enterprise customers. And I think that these cloud security blueprints that Amit talked about is something that many of our enterprise customers actually adopted and implemented in their environment. And not only, by the way, with Checkpoint products. They adopted it as a conceptual blueprints to secure the entire solution, whether they use the native security, whether they use the Checkpoint product, or whether they use other security products by other vendors. But it was a very good and comprehensive white paper, document, blueprint, very technical one that explains how to do it well.
Yeah, I mean, gentlemen, thank you so much. I mean, Itai, that's a great answer for that question. I can just speak from my experience, again, from being a field engineer myself, that having a place to start from that gives you a little bit of a leg up to start a project like, figuring out what my security posture is going to be in the cloud. I think that is a tremendous value to an end customer. So agreed. And if anyone would like to get their hands on that blueprint, you can actually visit us in our virtual booth under featured partners and grab that. We have a link to it in there. Right. Let's scoot along here. So, security for Office 365. This is kind of an open-ended question that I suppose we'll put it out there for all three of you to share some of thoughts and opinions on the matter. We know that Office 365 is part of the three cloud strategy that Microsoft has. Obviously, a ton of workloads are being transitioned into Office 365, and naturally, with Teams being a part of that equation, a lot of data, a lot of compliance and regulatory issues typically manifest themselves in this collaborative space. What are your collective thoughts on how are customers securing their applications and their workloads that are transitioning over to Office 365, being manipulated by Power Platform and the like? And I'd say, Chris, go. Anyone who would like to jump in first.
Oh, gee, thank you. Yeah, so again, giving the kind of pragmatic answer, because this is a pragmatic session, is that, like some of the answers that we've already had, security has to be made up of multiple layers. It has to be made up of multiple vendors. Whether a single vendor strategy is a good idea or not, there's a lot of very good security tooling already in 365. But we've also got CloudGuard SaaS, which allows us to connect into Office 365 and maybe shine a light or a magnifying glass into some of the corners that maybe the native security within 365 doesn't quite touch. And obviously, another sort of pragmatic answer to that is that because CloudGuard SaaS is part of Checkpoint Infinity, if you're an Infinity customer, you've essentially already bought it. So you can have 365 security, you can kind of interlock that with CloudGuard SaaS, and you can have an even broader coverage by having kind of different points of view. So I think from a pragmatic level, that would kind of be my answer.
I think that when it comes to Office 365, and I would say specifically to email, definitely one of the key attack vectors is for you to get phishing emails and to get malicious files over the emails. But the situation today is that you get the same phishing links and the malicious files not only via the emails. You can get them via your Facebook account, box. You can download them from the internet. When you're surfing the internet, you can get them from multiple locations. So it's essential that you block the same phishing link and the same malicious files with the same level of technology and security capabilities across all the attack vectors, and not only over via your emails, because then you are only closing the door but keeping the windows open. So that's, I would say, my strong recommendation is that look at the attack methods, which is phishing and files, and look at the attack vectors, which can be application, mobile application, can be websites, and can be email, and can be social network. All of them, you can get those things and get infected.
Great points, gentlemen. One thing that was posed in the Q&A, I think, Amit, you actually answered it, but just to answer it real quick, or at least add a little bit of color commentary around it, I think the term single pane of glass is somewhat overused in the market. But one thing that, even being a relative newcomer to Checkpoint, one thing that I have noticed is that due to our deep integration with the Azure core capabilities and being able to have that kind of bidirectional passing through of data, to say Sentinel, for example, and pass all your, using it as a SIM and passing our data to it, I would say that, yes, it's overused, but if you can have something that is multi-cloud ready and able to really plug in and see everything and really allow, intelligence like Threat Cloud to be able to be part of that equation, I think that Checkpoint's uniquely positioned to be able to realize that dream of a single pane of glass more than some of the other vendors in the market space. So just worth pointing out. It does look like we have about a minute left. So if there are any additional questions, please feel free to put those into the chat. If you are already moving on to your next session, we do want to say thank you. I want to say thank you to the gentlemen who joined me today. So Itai, Amit, Chris, thank you guys so much for your thoughts. I would encourage everyone after this session or anytime during the next 2 days, visit our virtual booth where we have a little journey to the cloud with confidence tag in the feature partner section. There's a wealth of information, the blueprints available, and we also have a Teams chat that's open with myself and some of the other security architects and engineers to be able to answer questions. So please visit us and pick our brains. That's what we're here for. And I think we're at time.
Yeah,
no more questions either. So awesome. Mission accomplished. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thanks, Brad. Great job.
Thanks all.